so just I'll make sure I
Okay. Good evening, and welcome to the Fort Smith City Board of Directors study session this July 15th of 2025. This time we'll go to the first item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item on this evening's agenda is a discussion regarding the Fort Smith Cemeteries, Inc. request regarding Rose Lawn, Holy Cross, and Forrest Park cemeteries. As the board will remember, in each of the past 2 years, the operations of the cemeteries could not sustain the cost of maintaining the vegetation on the properties, to the point that the city's demolition and cleanup fund was used to abate the nuisance, resulting in liens on the properties. The current board members of the nonprofit Fort Smith Cemeteries, Inc. were recruited over the past year and a half or so to volunteer their services to navigate the nonprofit to a place where it can sustain its operations. This continues to be a difficult task, leading to a request from Marty Clark, president of the Fort Smith Cemeteries, Inc., that was included in your packet for this evening's meeting, and a request to address the city's board of directors about this item. So, Mr. Clark, if you'd like to, you can come and sit at the table if you like, but I think you have to turn the microphone on. Yeah, I think.
Working. Are we good? Okay. First of all, yeah, I could sit here and converse about this, and we're certainly open to answering any questions you guys have. But I'm going to go ahead and read an opening statement that I wrote out for you guys. So, good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Thank you for allowing Ed Ralston and myself the opportunity to speak with you today about an issue that not only affects our past, but also the future of our city. That's the long-term care and the management of three of Fort Smith's most historic cemeteries. Rose Lawn and Holy Cross are sort of one. Forrest Park is another, and then Washington Cemeteries we're also including in this request. Fort Smith Cemeteries, Inc. was created, I think, in 2020. Or maybe 2021 by Bill Wilson. And at that time, it was created to take over Forrest Park, and Rose Lawn and Holy Cross, which was previously owned by the Cotner family. The economics of running a cemetery are pretty terrible, and so at that time, Bill Wilson approached the Cotner family about taking these over, and they did that. They gladly dispersed of their ownership of that, and it got rolled into this nonprofit called Fort Smith Cemeteries, Inc. Bill Wilson, some of you may remember, he was the former CEO of Pradco. He was passionate about the project, and he's a very persuasive person. And he created this nonprofit to essentially take over and improve those cemeteries which had been greatly dilapidated by the lack of financial means, and they had fallen into some significant disrepair. Bill, like I said, I think he had great intentions. He borrowed a lot of money. He put a lot of money into the projects. Most of that went into Rose Lawn and not into Forrest Park, which actually has the greater needs. And I believe, and Bobby, you may speak to this as well, Bobby runs the Washington Cemetery, and she was actually part of that initial group. Bill had visited with her and recruited her, but she kind of saw the direction in which his management style was going, and it wasn't to her benefit, and she basically removed herself from that arrangement. And so that's why Rose Lawn, Holy Cross, and Forrest Park are the only three different cemeteries that are part of Fort Smith Cemeteries, Inc. currently. Let me keep reading this. Bill Wilson was motivated primarily by the fact that he had family buried at Rose Lawn, so he put most of his resources into that. Me personally, I was extremely impressed by what he did because my father, Larry Clark, died in 2020, and he was buried at Rose Lawn. And when he was buried there, it was in really bad shape. The roads were washed out. It was terrible. The maintenance was horrible. My brother Scott and I had to go out and weed eat the area the night before the funeral. So it was not in good shape. And then I go out 3 months later, and it looks great. It's got paved roads. It's got a new fence. The maintenance is good. And I found out that Bill had been involved in this project. And so I actually saw Bill out in the public one time shortly thereafter, and I went up and thanked him because I was like, this is awesome. It looks great. And I didn't really know. I'd heard he'd put $1 million of his own money into it. That turned out not to be exactly correct, but I thanked him for that. And then he started to sort of recruit myself and Ed Ralston over here to kind of be on his board. But we met with him a few times, and we decided we shouldn't join the board at that time. Long story short is there was meaningful progress that was made at Roselawn, but the reality is that the business model for operating cemeteries today is broken, and Ed's going to talk about that. It's the economic realities of the situation that we're in, and more importantly, how that would affect Fort Smith. Additionally, the trends are moving rapidly towards cremation rather than burial. And that's been exacerbated post-COVID. I don't know why, but that's definitely the direction in which we're going, and a lot of that has to do with cost. But that affects the financial abilities of the cemeteries as well. Since Bill's departure in 2022 due to cognitive health issues and a bankruptcy, we have been doing everything that we can. I got on the board. Ed got on the board. Andy Brown is on the board. Bill Priakis is on the board. We've done everything that we could do to keep it going, but the truth is sobering. Cemetery operations have been sustained by the financial contributions of a very few handful of people, private individuals, including myself, and this is neither scalable or responsible as a long-term strategy. We've trimmed costs, we've negotiated debt relief, we've engaged in creative fundraising ideas, but it's not enough. The revenue generated from lot sales and interments cannot keep pace with the mounting infrastructure needs, the rising maintenance costs, and the compliance obligations that are tied to being perpetual care cemeteries. And we can talk to you about that in further detail. Forrest Park Cemetery is a prime example. It's in desperate need of over $150,000 in immediate road and drainage repairs. These aren't cosmetic issues. They affect safety, accessibility, and the basic dignity of those that are laid to rest and the families who visit them. A state law that passed a few years ago allows for cemeteries to withdraw up to 20% of their trust fund once every 10 years for capital improvements. And we'll talk about the trust fund. We have over $800,000 collectively. They're in a state escrow trust fund managed by the Department of Cemeteries. And they allow us to access those funds once every 10 years up to 20%, but that's not nearly enough, and it's certainly not sustainable for the long-term needs. So what we are asking for today is not just financial support. We're asking for a structural shift. We believe that the long-term operational and financial responsibility for these cemeteries belongs with the city of Fort Smith. The city already operates one major public cemetery in Fort Smith. That's Oak Cemetery on Greenwood Avenue. You have the systems, the staff, and the governance in place to manage these properties with the level of oversight and sustainability that they require. More importantly, we believe that this is the right thing to do. A city holds no greater duty than to honor and care for its dead. Letting these cemeteries fall into disrepair would not only be a shameful erosion of civic trust, it would be a failure of stewardship. Well-maintained cemeteries reflect a community's values. They offer dignity, history, and a sense of place. And we're not here to point fingers at all or assign any blame. We're here because it's time to find a real solution, and we believe that that solution begins with this discussion with the city of Fort Smith. So Ed's going to give some of the financial, metrics and the challenges that we face.
Yeah, good evening. In your packet came this afternoon, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at it. I put a small summary together of the finances since Marty and I got involved in the board. It's not a huge financial debacle, right? So we don't have this huge mess, but we do have a consistent shortcoming of operational funds. So and I'll go through the numbers, but just to kind of put a perspective on it, over the course of 2025, in 2023 and 2024, the city supported the operations by paying the bill for the third-party lawn service, which was a huge benefit. That's not happened in 2025. So 85 acres of cemetery, and we have currently 2 outside guys that work. So if you've been by Forrest Park, I drove by yesterday, grass is knee-high. It's going to stay knee-high because we have no money to pay anyone. And had it not been for generosity of, and Marty mentioned, a small group of people stepping up, payroll would not have been met at least a half a dozen times over the course of 2025. And so it's really just not a sustainable model. When the perpetual care style of cemetery management was put into place, decades and decades ago, which these cemeteries operate under, I think the thought was that 10% of lot sales get put into a trust, and that money creates earnings, and that would take care of the property forever, and the math just doesn't work. So the earnings that we get, which range from $10,000 to $20,000 a year, we get out, that'll mow it 1.5 times. So that's not enough to make it work. The information that I shared here, as far as the income and expenses, brings in around $300 to $350 a year. The expenses are about the same, a little bit more. With maintenance, it's about $70,000 more. So we've got, I would say, on an annual pace, you're talking about roughly $100,000 deficit to run the cemeteries properly, without a lot of third-party giving. In addition to that, so I can get into the numbers are here. We can go through it line by line if you wanted to, but it's probably not overly necessary. I put some notes as far as some of the specific line items, but as it currently stands, we have 1.5 office people and 2 guys that work outside, and that's the extent of the staff. So, the degradation of some of the improvements that we made in recent years is beginning to show, and by deferred maintenance. As far as the assets and liabilities of the operation go, combined, it's about 85 acres of land, and then Washington Cemetery, which I'll also comment about, and Bobby's here. She's a saint. She runs Washington basically on her own and gets 100% volunteer. There are no full-time employees. Probably, what do you run, about 5-6 burials a year, somewhere in that neighborhood, and it's 100% voluntary. And I think we have a real obligation to maintain, to include that cemetery in this discussion as well. But as far as the Fort Smith Cemeteries organization, it's the cemeteries Marty mentioned that are 85 acres. He mentioned Rose Lawn is in a good improved condition. Forrest Park has some pretty good infrastructure needs. The 2 big open items that we've kind of paused our discussions on as far as a path forward, we have $600,000-800,000 in perpetual care funds. We also still owe First Security Bank $600,000. We owed First National $200,000, and First National forgave it 2 years ago in a very gracious move towards helping the city, and that was a quiet move that happened, and they deserve a lot of thanks for that. We still owe First Security $600,000. We're in very close conversation with them. We've not made a payment in a long time. They're not accruing the interest. It's just put in a non-accrual status. They, along with us, have visited at great length with the cemetery department in Fort Smith, which is part of the executive branch that sits inside the finance department. So the people in Little Rock, I would say, are very agreeable to us finding a good long-term solution. So we've got rules around what we can do with the trust fund, and we also have debt. The fund can cover the debt, but as the rules are currently written, it's not as easy as just clean it up and hand it off. So there's a path, I think, that we all feel like we can go down to make that happen, but we're at that point where we can't go further down that path if we don't feel like these cemeteries landing with the city is a logical outcome or a realistic outcome. So I would say that, we would like to understand what the feeling is of the city for taking these on permanently, knowing that there's some more work to do. It's not as easy as straightforward as just hand over the checkbook. There are a couple of big items that we can get through, but we need to know where we need to head. So I guess with that, Bobby, would you like to make any comments on behalf?
Maybe talk about what it's here. You can have my seat.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Good evening to all of you. I represent Washington Cemetery. Washington Cemetery is the last African-American burial ground here in Fort Smith. And she's on the brink of going completely defunct. All it takes is one citation from the city as far as a 7-day grass cutting. And if I don't have it in my pocket to pay, then I'm in big trouble. We had an incident out there about 2 years ago where the grass got excessively high. I had received a citation from, and I understand those things do happen. And it took the whole community out there to help me get that grass cut. We were in triple digits for the whole month and a half. We had people having heat strokes trying to cut grass. But we rallied together and we got it done. I just want to see Washington taken care of. I've been there for 10 years. Right now I'm on top of Washington. I really don't want Washington on top of me. I just want to see her be able to carry on. I have nowhere near what they have as far as finances. What money I take in for the burials, it goes right back out, preferably the same day. And this is where my dilemma is. We need an expansion on the sidewalk in order to make it more ADA accessible. We also need some trees trimmed in order for us to be able just to get underneath the pavilion. We need gravel for the driveways. And then we just need, matter of fact, a lady called me right before I walked in the door. Someone ran into the fence, knocked a great big gaping hole in it. The insurance paid off, and they'll start on the fence next week, sir. So I just want to see Washington. We don't have very few landmarks here in Fort Smith to identify with the African American community. And it's a shame that the only thing that they have to look forward to when they come here is our cemetery. We had the Arkansas Historical Society come in from the state this past May. This past May. And I thank God for those who provided the signage out there so they could find the cemetery, because she's not an easy find. But I just wanted to let y'all know that she's near and dear to me, and in order for her to keep functioning, something as simple as getting the grass cut would be able to take the money that I need to go ahead and finish some of the projects that still need to be completed. And I thank you for your time.
I'd like to point out, too, that we did some math today, and this is Lisa Welch over here, by the way. She runs Roselawn Holy Cross in Forrest Park, and she's a saint. I don't know. I'm just appreciative every day she shows up, because I wouldn't want to do what she's doing. But she's done a great job of holding it together and fighting the financial fights. But one thing that we figured out today is that there's over 55,000 graves in these 3 cemeteries that we're talking about. So we're talking about honoring the people from the past. They go back to the late 1800s, mid-1800s at Forrest Park, to those that are going to be buried next week. So we're talking about honoring and taking care of those that have passed before us, and also taking care of it for the future. And I do think that a way that a city can be measured in part is by how it takes care of its dead, and I think that's important to state. So, with that, if there's any questions we can entertain right now.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Marty, thank you to Ed, thank you to Miss Bobby, Miss Lisa for the work that you all do and have put in over many months and years, honoring families, honoring history. Understand the difficulties that are associated with this. I've always been supportive of the assistance that the city's been able to provide. I'm supportive of the concept of the city managing and caring for these properties, because I do believe that it's very important that we handle that responsibility. And it sounds like from hearing from each of you that you've ran the race and taken the torch as far as you can, and we're grateful for that. And if you look behind yourselves, if you all step away or are unable to continue, I don't get the sense that you're seeing a line of people out the door and around the block ready to take up the torch and keep running with it. And so I think this is very much something that the city should seriously consider bringing under our wing and into the fold. And I appreciate you all taking the time to be here tonight and for the work that each of you has done over the months and the years.
Thank you. Director Good.
Yeah, I didn't plan on really saying anything, but I really enjoyed the presentation. I've had many occasions to talk to Bill Wilson, been out to the cemeteries, looked at what he wanted to do, looked at his plans, try to get some volunteers to help clean and move rocks, and just the passion that you guys have just to do what you do. I know it's a very thankless job, but the moment that people notice the grass is overgrown or something is not done, you're the first to hear the complaints. So I know it's a thankless job, and I know Miss Bobby has poured tons and tons of sweat equity and phone call equity trying to get volunteers and workers there at Washington. So just appreciate everything that you guys are doing for this. And like the Vice Mayor said, me personally, I absolutely believe that the city should take its role in maintaining these cemeteries. I know that it's going to come with an expense that we haven't looked at recently, I'm sure, but even at that, there is a business model to run cemeteries, and at some point, like was said by Mr. Clark, the way we're running it right now is not sustainable for any long-range plans. We have to look at something that's going to be sustainable.
Any other comments? Just for the record, I serve as an ex officio at the cemetery, and let me take a moment to thank all. Let me thank all of you that have given up your time, energy, and resources to make sure that these final resting places are what we want and what the citizens deserve. Our history is connected to those that are there. And again, you kept it alive. And Ms. Welch, thank you. And Bob is certainly legendary across the state in what she's done for Washington. And it's one of those things that we just need to take care of. It's our history, it's our legacy are tied to individuals in these cemeteries. So I'm going to suggest we do what we can to make sure it happens. Again, these gentlemen and many others have invested their personal resources into making this work because they have a handle on the importance of it and why we should maintain them. They should be special places. And that's what we want. We want when our families and friends come to visit those that are in our cemeteries, that they find a place of comfort and peace, not overgrown grass, not overturned tombstones. And so with that, Director Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say thank you to ma'am for your presentation on the Washington Cemetery. That was very touching to me, and I think it's interesting because I love history as well, and so I appreciate you bringing that to the attention of the board. Also, obviously my day job is to be a pastor, so I've stood at gravesides and understand the importance of it. I think also as an elected official, though, I'm sensitive to the limitations of the city as well, and I do echo the mayor's agreement of finding a way to help how we can. What does that look like? And I wonder if there's even a way to continue this conversation of honoring the dead without overburdening the living. And as we think about care for the cemetery, I know from the faith-based community at least, and I know there are other faith-based leaders in the room here tonight, that perhaps this is a way we can serve in our context, in our community. And I'm wondering, we have 7 acres of our property at our church, and I have volunteers that take care of it, and they want to help, and they're not Bible study kind of leaders, but they will run a mower and a weed eater, and they love people. And so I think my head is thinking through, is there a way to expand this into the conversation of other fellow nonprofits or even faith communities that could step to this and be a good partner for you all and the city partner in some level? The thing I get nervous about taking it on all together is the city being overburdened without at least increasing its staffing. Because I think there is going to have to be an increase in staffing if that becomes the case. But if we could expand, I don't think the community knows about these needs until they come to public discussion and forum like we're hearing tonight. So I'm curious to see what kind of feedback that we can get in that regard. I know I will personally commit that I have friends, and I would love to make sure you have information to help here. But the questions I think for me would be, I have a few. One is, what is the remaining availability of these cemeteries? You've mentioned the 85 acres. Is there still available plots? Will this be serving even more to come in the sense of, do we have an idea?
Lisa can speak to that, I think.
Yes, so we own the land surrounding Holy Cross, so we could triple in size at least. And then we own more land that's not currently plotted or being used in Roselawn as well. And so
Do you mind speaking that into the mic for the record, for city clerk and all those that'll have to document what was said?
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yes, I'm Lisa Welch, but yes, we have lots of room to expand. We could triple the size that we have in Holy Cross right now. We own all of that surrounding land, and we allow the city access through it to get to the cleanouts for the sewers. So it wouldn't take much to open that. It's pretty level. And same in Roselawn, there's 2 areas that we have that aren't plotted yet. So we could expand those into, probably 2,000 more graves. I think Holy Cross would be a lot more than that.
Now, were those two birthed and originated by the Catholic Church?
So the Holy Cross what I understand is that it was originally maintained by the Catholic diocesan that's in Little Rock now, I think is when I spoke to him. And then it was given to us, but it's been, like 20, 30 years ago.
So, you don't have, anyone can buy a spot.
Correct.
And move. So, it's open. And I think that's encouraging. That's why I think of when I think of the faith-based of this. And the other part is, when we talked about the infrastructure for Forrest Park Cemeteries being the one that has the most deferred, could you just briefly, high level, highlight what those would be? Or, is
You're
that...
talking about the challenges?
Yeah,
at
when
Forrest Park?
they mention like infrastructure improvements, is it...
Oh, where do I start? So, I was there today, of course, and I was there until 7 o'clock last night. So we have families that can't drive to their graves because we have a crevasse now that runs through where the road was that's over a foot deep, 18 inches deep in some areas. So if you're not comfortable straddling it, or if you don't have 4-wheel drive, you can't drive down some of the roads. They're not usable. And so people have started driving up kind of on the stones to get around it on both sides, because they'll get halfway down and realize that they can't maneuver, so they drive up on this. So we have that challenge. And then in the back, we've got flooding so bad that it puts an area of stones completely underwater by more than a foot. So they're literally, when their family comes to visit them, if it's just rained, if they can get back there, there's more than a foot of water that sets over an area of stones back there.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Sure.
So on just a couple, so Marty mentioned that we have access to 10% of the trust fund 20% every 10 years. So we put together a list of the needs. You have to submit the needs to the state. Once they approve it, then with bids and everything else, then you can have the work done. So we have that together and submitted, and included in that is the vast majority of all of the work is slated for Forrest Park. So it's drainage and road system and a building. There's currently the office there, which also doubles as a maintenance building. Looks like an old house, and we don't let any customers in, and we really don't like our guys to go in. It's literally, if you walk in and the wind blows heavy, you never know when it's going to happen. So, anyway, the building, drainage, and streets or roads through there are the primary. Couple $100,000 is the kind of number.
Director Neil Martin.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate your time. Can you talk me through or walk me through the fundraising process that you guys have been through? I'm assuming we've walked through that. And
honestly, I've approached a lot of people that have prominent families there or that have the financial means to be able to give, and it's been really surprising to me their lack of interest in doing that. And I think it's been because of the degradation of the facility over all of the years. They don't have any confidence in giving their money and that something useful will be done with it. So I think that's been surprising to me. And part of my thoughts, and then when I optimistically took this over 2 years ago, I thought I can fundraise my way out of this issue. The interest is not really there because of those reasons. But I would propose that once those improvements are made, that we have a Friends of Fort Smith Cemeteries that supports the city in the initiative, just like Friends of the Public Library does and stuff like that. So that's kind of what my thoughts.
What about grant funding and things like that, especially kind of Black History fund dollars associated with Black History, those types of things? Has there been any
You can probably speak to the
review of those dollars that are available and
So yeah, there's limited grants available. I've gone through and looked at some of them, and in my past life, I have written grants. This requires more than I know how to do, and hiring a grant writer was something that we looked at. And as you know, that's expensive. We found somebody who would be great at it and has kind of a whole new look for us and wants to, like, do the ribbon cutting with the Chamber of Commerce that we just joined, and kind of start this whole new plan. But we can't afford to hire her.
Sure.
So they're available.
Okay.
I think the other thing, Neil, is, I think most people would be surprised to, you just assume it's a perpetual care and that the math has to work and the money has to come in. But, there's no religious affiliates. I'm Catholic. Guarantee you the people that I go to church with that I see would probably be very surprised to know that Holy Cross is the Catholic cemetery. I see Church doesn't give any money to Holy Cross. There's not a single church in this city that, I would guess that the vast majority of the people buried in these cemeteries go to the churches in this community, and the churches don't fund anything. They don't give any money to the deal. And so is it a shame on us that we haven't been effective at getting them to, or that we haven't asked everybody? Well, there's only so much time in the day that we can run around trying to raise money also. So, yeah, I think it kind of is where it is. At some point, the community has to fund the care for these cemeteries. The incoming money based on new plot sales and services provided to open and close the grave just will not cover the cost. So somehow the community has to pay, whether it's by way of city taxation collection or pass the hat at church or fundraise, get corporate citizens to donate or whatever. But we haven't been as effective at that as it is needed in order for the math to work.
And this perpetual care fund, that's not the same thing as the Arkansas Insolvent Cemetery Grant, is it? Two separate things. Have we looked into that at all? I don't know what's in there, but just research. Those are some of the things.
So what happens if we go insolvent is the state of Arkansas takes over.
Well, it looks like they've got some grant dollars that are available for that. It just maybe something to look at.
So we just so you know, Marty's been to Little Rock once or twice. We've had a variety of tele-meetings with the folks in Little Rock that run this department. They've come up here. We hosted them here. We had a meeting. We toured them through. They're very familiar. They were the recipients of They are the recipients of complaints. So when the cemetery is not to someone's liking and you want to complain, beyond calling our phone number, you call them, and so they're aware of our situation. And so they're the folks that would operate it in the event that we defaulted.
And I would say, too, that the state, we've had a lot of conversations with them. They did tell us, interestingly, that Roselawn was the most complained about cemetery in the state for quite a few years before these improvements were made in 2020. So, and part of that has to do with Lisa actually coming on board as well. But, really the finality of it would be, yes, the state takes it over. They would do a horrible job. It would be worse than it currently is. And they've admitted that. I mean, they're like, that's the last thing we want. They want everything we can do to keep it from landing in their lap. And they've been extremely supportive of us. And but there's really nothing that they can do financially to help us.
So, other cemeteries, I don't know how many cemeteries there are in the city. What's the difference between them and these three? Are they insolvent? Are they making money?
I don't think
I mean, outside of Oak.
there aren't any that are making money.
There's not as many as you would think, but the one that is city-owned and operated is the only one I know that's not in a similar situation to us. I don't know who the other one. There's one out on State Line Road, and I'm not familiar with that.
And I guess the way I look at the numbers that you sent, and thank you, Mr. Ralston, for sending those numbers today. Without the $149,000 over the last 2 years from the city, there would not be a net profit. I mean, I see a net profit here of $20,000 and $30,000, right? And so without the city putting in that $72,000 and $77,000, there wouldn't be any profit here.
Correct. And mind you, this is not accrual-based accounting. This is basically a summary of the checkbook, so it doesn't include any sort of capital, right? As far as if we were to make buying lawnmowers, the ongoing equipment, those sorts of things. So, yes, correct. If it weren't for the city and if it weren't for the donations, I mean, the donation line is pretty much equal to, a little more than what the net profit would be.
Last question I have is when Mr. Wilson took out the loan, what was the collateral on the loan? Is it the land itself, or is there something else?
Yes, and in Bill's mind, he thought, this land's worth $13 million. That's how he was thinking at the time. It's not worth anything because you can't sell it,
right.
So it's personally guaranteed by him, and he filed bankruptcy, and it's personally guaranteed by a guy named Larry Bone. And to my knowledge, he hasn't filed bankruptcy. So,
is that okay?
Sell his business.
See the eye doctor?
Trotter or later.
Okay, that's all I have right now.
Okay. And keep in mind, they've been talking to the Cemetery of the State Agency about how we can get access to those funds that are being held. Close to, what, $800,000 maybe?
Yeah.
There's $800,000 that you just can't get to. And if we could get to some of those funds, then we could really make a major impact on the deficiencies in the cemeteries. So I think, was it Representative Sidney Crawford, if I'm not mistaken? I think Representative Crawford has had conversations and looking at proposing legislation that would give us access to some of those funds. Director Rigo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to make sure that this continues, that this process moves forward. I'd like to make a motion directing city administration, to continue the conversations and the process with the folks at Fort Smith Cemeteries, Inc., and kind of report back to the board during the second regular meeting in August what some options look like that would be available to us, and really with a breakdown to include, things like what are some of the maintenance costs, the big ticket maintenance costs versus, sort of a breakdown of just what the day-to-day, operational maintenance looks like versus the big-time capital investments.
I'll second.
Director Good, any further comments?
Yeah, just a couple feel-good comments about this current situation. Vice Mayor, thank you very much for making that motion. But I had an opportunity to work with Lisa and, of course, Bill Wilson on a couple of occasions with some residents on the north side. One young man was involved in a car accident and died, and his family. The mother didn't speak. The mother spoke English, the father didn't, and they weren't able to take care of their son. In talking to Lisa, they actually took care of that whole family in that time of need. Also, there was a young lady also on the north side of town whose son had committed suicide. And Bill Wilson met with her, spoke with her, and took care of her needs as well. So this is just not, a grass cutting operation we're talking about. We're not just talking about maintaining. We're talking about an operation that the community needs. I don't know any of us that are going to leave this place and not have to go somewhere. And this organization as a whole gives back to the community. So we as a community need to take care of our facilities.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
We go to item number 2 on the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. This next item is a discussion requested by the board related to the impact of special events on operating budgets and overtime expense of the city departments, specifically including the police department, but also other departments that provide services to events such as solid waste, parks, streets, transit, fire, and other departments. There are many events sponsored in the city each year, some sponsored by the city itself, and others sponsored by nonprofits or event organizers for the purpose of showcasing Fort Smith and its amenities. As police services and security are always an important part of these events, Police Chief Danny Baker will address this item to start with.
Do you mind if I stand at the podium? I would.
Yes, you can go take your microphone. Chief, you recognize.
Thank you. This might be a little bit easier if we have some of my staff coming up here. I think you might stumble over the chairs. I apologize for the last minute handing out of these documents. As I was going over this afternoon, I realized that it's a copy of our special events application. It might be relevant to the conversation. But this document can be obtained easily by anybody that wants to see it at the Fort Smith Police Department website, going through fortsmithar.gov. But good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address this issue. Prior to and during recent budget discussions, there were questions raised by a couple of you about how special events are policed and how those services are funded. And I expressed to you then how important it is for us to be involved in the planning and the execution of these events, and I cautioned against doing anything that would discourage cooperation with us, but that there might be room for some improvement in how those services are funded. So as a result, this study session was called, and let me say before we get too deep into the conversation that I am not proposing any new legislation, I'm not proposing any ordinance or ordinance amendments, and I don't believe that there are any operational changes that need to be made in how the police department plans for and supports all of the parades and special events that take place in Fort Smith. The police department recognizes that parades and special events organized by public, private, and nonprofit entities are important contributors to the economic and social well-being of our community. In addition to attracting commerce and showcasing local amenities, properly organized and managed community events often provide citizens and visitors with meaningful social interactions and cultural exchanges and help to create and maintain a healthy, vibrant community. But because these events often impact public rights of way and draw large crowds of people together that create enhanced needs for safety and planning, the execution must follow a comprehensive set of rules and involve various public agencies such as the police, fire, EMS, parks, and others. And as we've all witnessed from numerous tragedies across the country involving mass casualty incidents, horrific acts involving vehicles driving into crowds, we can't cut corners or leave anything to chance when it's related to public safety. The permit conditions that we place on all special event organizers concerning police personnel needs, traffic control measures, security tactics, use of specialized equipment, sanitation, and other public safety considerations are based on well-established best practices as well as proactive responses to ever-changing and emerging new threats. These necessary and non-negotiable services carry associated costs above and beyond the normal expectations of the police department. In certain instances, some or all of these expenses are being borne by the city of Fort Smith. In others, the cost of providing these services is budgeted within our annual budget or is paid for by the event organizer by hiring off-duty police officers or renting a necessary traffic control equipment. The Fort Smith Parades and Special Events Ordinance, which I provided a copy of in your packet, is Chapter 24, Article 6, Section 24-201, provides a mechanism for recouping costs and expenses of public services such as police salaries, equipment use, sanitary toilets, garbage collection, and etc. Paragraph M, and I believe it's on page 5 in that attachment, states that event costs are to be borne by the applicant. All event costs, including but not limited to costs for cleanup, repair, fire services, and police services, shall be the responsibility of the applicant or the sponsor. The applicant or sponsor shall be billed the actual costs incurred by the city for such services as determined by the city administrator. And to my knowledge, no special event sponsor or organizer has ever been billed for the police costs or any of the other department costs that are incurred by the city as this existing ordinance allows. Instead, the police department, i.e. me or my staff, have been often left to figure out how to pay for the costs associated with policing a special event. I believe we've done a good job balancing public expectations with budgetary constraints. However, our current way of doing things does leave room for some accusations of unfair, possibly disparate application of the law. Some have suggested to me that the city should bear all of the costs associated with a special event because that's what they pay taxes for. I disagree with this premise, but you may not, and should you choose to adopt such a policy, it would certainly simplify things for the police department. You'll need to be prepared, if you do that, for a significant increase in budgeted overtime expenditures because the police department simply does not have enough on-duty personnel to properly police all of the parades and special events that are held in Fort Smith. In preparation for this discussion, we researched several Arkansas cities to determine their policies regarding associated costs with special events. I've provided their findings and recommendations of staff in an attached memo. I also provided you with a copy of the current Parades and Special Events Ordinance as well as the Ordinance on Special Events in City Parks. Not included in your packets but distributed to you this tonight was a copy of the special events application. As you can see, this is much more than just an application. It's a comprehensive guide and an information tool for anyone seeking to hold a parade or special event in Fort Smith. And it's the first step in the planning process. I'd also note at this point that the Special Events Ordinance allows me to charge a permit application fee for every application that's filed with us. We have never charged or collected this fee. I would also like to mention at this point that none of this discussion should pertain to citizens who are peacefully exercising their constitutionally protected right to protest and demonstrate. While our special event ordinance does require a special event permit for any gathering of more than 40 people that obstructs or limits public rights of way, the police department has never enforced this requirement. We encourage the organizers of protests and demonstrations to complete the application so that we can have the information that we need to properly plan for their safety and the safety of the public, but we've never insisted on it. Protests are often spontaneous and in response to current events, and we're not going to do anything that unnecessarily chills free speech and exercise of constitutional rights. I think our approach has been very effective over the years with over 40 protests that have taken place since 2020 in Fort Smith. We've had no property damage. We've had no interference with traffic, no injuries, and I believe only one arrest in those 40 demonstrations. So I think it's very important that we make a distinction between the exercise of free speech and all other special events. With that, I'm open to questions, discussion. I have staff on hand to answer any questions that I might not be able to.
From the board. Director Rigo.
Thank you. So do I understand correctly, based on your remarks here, Chief, in addition to the materials that you sent us, that, you know, there's obviously, based not only on what we currently have on the books, but also the comparisons that you did with other, you know, cities, you know, is what you're stating that there certainly could be changes made or modifications to, you know, existing practice made if that's something we desired? However, that's not something you're advocating for or believe is necessarily a top priority with regard to how things are functioning with your department at present?
I don't think we need to touch anything operationally. I think we're handling that effectively. I do think that there are improvements that could be made in how we determine which events we choose to support financially and which ones we don't. The term that is commonly used is city-sponsored events. I don't know if that's actually the appropriate way to describe them, but we have a number of events currently that are city-sponsored in that we bear some or all of the associated costs that relate to them. A lot of these events are long-standing events in the community. Christmas parade, Fort Days Rodeo Parade, Steel Horse Rally. The Steel Horse Rally is actually a combination of different funding sources. The city provides some overtime through the police department. We budget for that annually because this is a recurring event. We know that it's going to be every year. We know how much within a certain ballpark amount we're going to spend for overtime to properly police it. But that event, they also utilize, they pay for some off-duty officers, for Sebastian County Sheriff's Office personnel. It's such a large event that we don't have the manpower at the police department to completely police it the way it needs to be. Sometimes there's been special events that they're new, they're nonprofits. The previous city administrator has said we're going to provide the police services for this for the first couple of years until you allow them to get on their feet, so to speak. But it's really just kind of a gray area that we've been operating in. And I don't know exactly what it should look like, but I think we need to have a little bit better. The police department needs to have a little bit better guidance in which events we're willing to say we're going to support as a city and which ones we're not, so that there isn't any accusations that we're unfairly giving one group an advantage and another over another. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Director Martin.
Yeah, I think that was what you just hit on there was the reason that I originally brought this up, because in some instances it looks like the city's picking and choosing winners. In certain instances, there's not a lot of competition between, say, the Peacemaker Festival or the 4th of July, the Mayor's 4th of July. But, in terms of, there's plenty of runs going on around the city. And, we're choosing to fund the Fort Smith Marathon, which I'm not really sure what categorizes something as a city-sponsored event in terms of its designation, right? Just because it says Fort Smith in there, I don't think that's the designation. But I think that was what some of the nonprofits were seeing as a miss. Some things would get an off-duty officer and others wouldn't. And so, I think that was really the point of what I wanted to look at is making sure that the city's being equitable in terms of how we're driving. And we could do a thing where city funds everything, city funds nothing. Or is there, it sounds like there's something in the middle of that. But, I want to make sure that we're not picking winners and losers and that become the prerogative of the chief of police or the city administrator at the time. So that's just kind of a comment that I wanted to share. But I don't know if I have a solution just yet, but that was my comment.
Mr. Dingman.
And an add-on to that in terms of that gray area we're speaking of right now is, if the first couple of years are accommodated by the police department without a fee for such, and then you come and try to do that on the third year, that's that you've never charged us for that before. Right. We haven't had to do, right. And so that exacerbates the problem, and it's much easier and supportive of the event to say, well, okay, we'll continue. And so, defining some of those things would be good for staff.
Right. And two, we did get a lot of emails today from citizens that were concerned about the board wanting to curtail protest, and I don't think that's the case at all. And that's all I want. I want at least everybody to hear that that's not what we're trying to do. It really, for me, when I brought this up and looked at the overtime dollars, because that's affecting the police budget, that's affecting the general fund, of which we have in 25, we've got about a $22 million shortfall. Not that we're going insolvent. We're spending. We're not going to have a fund balance. We'll have a fund balance. It's just there's a lot of spending going on in 25, and some of that's carried over from 24. But we just we need to be mindful of those things as it relates to how we're appropriating these dollars. So that's kind of.
Well, I think based off of recommendations from my staff, and also looking at what other comparable cities in Arkansas are doing, it's not unheard of for a city to do what we've been doing. I mean, it certainly there's benefit to the municipality supporting some of these things. Again, and as you just stated, how we do that I think needs to be outlined a little bit more. Mm-hmm. What we would like to see is a set number. I mean, if it's all or if it's nothing, I mean, that would certainly simplify things for us. Maybe be some challenges in trying to determine annually, what we're going to, if it's all, what we're going to put in the budget. But I think establishing a set number and what they are, and saying these are the events that we're willing to support, and then in conversations with Director Kemp about this earlier, it occurred to me that there are concerns about using public funds to support nonprofit ventures. And we have been given guidance from our legal team on how to do that. I mean, you need a contract for services, mm-hmm. And then the city can do that, can enter into some kind of agreement. So I would say, and this is probably where you were headed, but I would say we could say, okay, show us what you are providing the city of Fort Smith. What does your event bring to our community that would justify us supporting you financially?
Right. The one thing to think about is as this relates to some of these nonprofits. So let's look at recently there was a No Kings protest down here, right? Mm-hmm. So we provided police protection for that. We didn't charge them for that. But say something like the FCRA has a run, they're paying for a police officer or officers. So you've got kind of certain groups that, based on how they're organizing, gets penalized versus another, if that makes sense. They're penalized in terms of some pay, some don't. So
with the distinction of the protest as an exercise of
right, yeah, 100%. So it's you've got to. You've got
FCRA in the marathon. I see the
right. So I mean, it's just something I think we just think through.
Okay, thank you, Director Settle.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, listen to you and trying to think through this. Would it be easier if the board passed a resolution on a yearly basis of these are the city lists that we will sponsor, and that way it kind of takes some gray area out of the, and then to the board, would it be easier in the long run to put the funding for those city sponsored items and through the board of directors budget? So that way it comes through our funding. We allocate funding for whatever the police, the fire, sanitation all say to do X list. It's going to cost this much because you have an idea, and then it comes into us or our budget, and then we put it back into the budgets of each department as those items come through. So that way we can kind of, if we decide to increase it, as Neil said, or decrease it, I'm just thinking out loud from the budget side. I think we do owe the chief and the department heads a list of these are the items that we're going to fund for the 2026 year. I'm using an example. And if we decide to add or subtract, we can do that. And then that way the board gives direction to the department heads and city administrator on what to do.
Okay, thank you. Director Christina Casavas.
Well, I think one way to look at it is if you're an event, you're selling alcohol, you're making an income. You're selling vendor space, you're making an income. Whether they're donating it for nonprofit purposes or not is irrelevant. I think that should be, if you're hosting an event and you're bringing in an income, that should be part of your cost of doing business. I don't think the city should have to bear the burden of that. I mean, you know, I think there are events certainly that are for community members where they're not having to pay an entry fee, or, you know, they're not having to pay to set up or things like that. I think that's an easy way to make the distinction. You know, if you're coming, you know, for the 4th of July, we're not charging an entry fee for that. We're not making money on that. That's different. We want to protect the community. I know you worry a lot about mass casualty events, and I do as well, but I don't have any problems requiring an event that's bringing in $50,000, $100,000, $500,000 to say, listen, here are your requirements for security, and you need to pay. You know, I think that's an easy way to look at it is, are they charging an entry fee? Are they selling alcohol? Are they charging for vendor space? Because I've worked on, you know, events for nonprofits for years, and, you know, we always pay for our own security. I would never think to, you know, call the police department and say, hey, we're having black tie bingo at the library. You know, we want you guys to come secure it for free. You know, that's just something we do with off-duty officers or private security, and pay for that out of the money we raise. And I think that's probably a, you know, well-balanced way to look at it. You know, because we're talking about the city director budget. I mean, we don't generate any income. I mean, really what we're talking about is the general fund. So it's my 2 cents.
Rogers is actually one of the cities that, I mean, that's how they decide what they're going to do. All nonprofit events are covered with on-duty or overtime, which is taxpayer funded, and all for-profit events are covered through hiring off-duty security. I mean, that was one of the examples that we found.
Do we have very many events where people aren't paying some sort of entry fee or ticket or you know, vendor fee or things like that? I mean, I know we have a few, but most of them you see they've got food trucks, they've got, you know, beer tents, they've got things where they're generating some income from somebody.
Well, most of your runs have an entry fee. Parades, I don't think do they normally charge to enter the parade? I mean, those are examples of events that are free to the public. The mayor's 4th of July, there's no charge there. I'd say it's probably a good mix. I don't know if a 50-50, but...
Because I would imagine the needs for, you know, say the marathon are a lot less than Steel Horse Rally or things like that.
The marathon? No, that's all hands on deck. Yeah, that's
okay.
That's a very big event and requires a lot of support.
But that's not an event where people are paying to set up, you know, like vendor spaces, things like that. I mean, I think there's a way we can make that distinction because, you know, there are events down there where they take whole parking lots and rent them out, and people pay to rent those spaces, and that's income they've generated. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, thank you for your time tonight, and appreciate your conversation even before this meeting tonight. I think for me, the preference is a tiered approach. I'm all for onboarding new events. I mean, if we want to grow as a community, but I am also sympathetic to, is the event free? Are people having to pay to go to the event? And I tend to agree that if there's income coming in, then there can be some expenses that can go alongside it. Obviously, when the Steel Horse Rally came to its fruition, its origin, did we provide security on the onset, knowing that, or was it when we saw the event's success that the next year you got more involved? Does that question make sense?
It does.
Were you onboarded with the creation of the event?
Yes.
Or was it more when it got started?
Well, with that particular event, I think we were fully involved in the beginning. It was such a large event, something that Fort Smith had never seen before. There were really challenges in pulling it off. I mean, we expected all kinds of problems. And then, you know, as the years went on, we developed a system, and I mean, we pretty much know how we're going to handle that particular event. That event has been probably one of the biggest teachers that we've had, and how we should police these large events in Fort Smith, particularly downtown. The events that are held downtown present special challenges of their own, particularly when the event wants to shut down Garrison Avenue. I mean, you know, the Steel Horse Rally, I think they are a nonprofit, 501c3 organization. I don't know that there's anybody actually profiting from the event itself. Most or all the proceeds are donated to other charitable organizations, and that's another one of the challenges. Again, you know, wanting to be community minded, wanting to help people that are trying to do positive things in our community. A lot of these events, especially new ones, they're not going to necessarily make a lot of money, you know, in the first try, and all of their proceeds are going to some charitable organization in the city. Most of the 5Ks are usually in support of some, you know, children's needs or Special Olympics example.
So is there an event that you can think of outside of, because I feel like we've talked about Fort Smith Marathon or Steel Horse. Has there been an event that you guys have been approached about, didn't feel like it was maybe a gray area, you didn't know if you could be involved or didn't know if you could have the time because of the commitments you've already made in the year? Is there another example of an event that we're talking about that's created some of the conundrums that we're talking about?
Well, there have been events that have conflicted with other things that we have going on.
Okay.
And we've, you know...
So it kind of becomes a calendar conversation.
Sure, yeah. And that, I mean, that's why the 45-day requirement is written into the ordinance. And, you know, we typically hold organizers to that. I mean, if you can't get us the information sooner than 45 days in advance, then we can't guarantee we're going to be able to pull this thing off for you. And we have gotten pushback from some folks on that. There are areas of town that have been more challenging than others. I mean, I'm not speaking disparagingly about the Chaffee Crossing at all, but I mean, that area out there for, you know, a long, long time was wide open. There were no traffic issues. It was where people like to go to run and bicycle. The landscape has changed out there now. I mean, we've had people killed being hit by motorists while they're out bicycling. And so the need for us to be involved in races and things that are taking place on the street out there are now becoming more important. And sometimes it takes a while for the collective mindset to change. And so there's opposition. I mean, when we say, look, you have got to include us in this so we can, you know, help you keep your participants safe. Sometimes people don't understand that. Well, I've been out here doing this, you know, for the last 20 years. Well, we understand that, but times have changed and the landscape has changed, and it's more dangerous to do these things.
And I think that's why I think there's some level of balance to say that we create a fund or a line item that you know, no more than these dollars, you know, set a ceiling to it.
Sure.
So that these dollars are available for onboarding events to have help. But then when this fund is empty, it is empty. I think setting some ceiling for that or threshold for that. Because obviously, if you're going to, the other opposite of this is if you say, well, you'll have to do it this way, and then they just say, well, we'll provide our own event security, which may be inadequate for the bystanders or the citizens that are in attendance. I do prefer that the mayor and administration make these decisions versus the board making these decisions. I would love for them to use the filter of cultural exchange or economic impact, and then the board sets that threshold of there's no ambiguity anymore of the police department having to cover it. In the budget process, let's have a conversation and say, this is what we think we could do, and let's don't ping out of that. That's sort of my approach as well on this, as I'm thinking about this. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Director Good.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say I really agree with your comments, Director Settle, Director Kemp. and Christina Casavets. A lot of good information, a lot of good shared thoughts. I'm under the idea that the board just needs to let administration or the board even decide, which organizations are going to be city sponsored. Again, not shutting out any new events, but we can look at it from every year or two. But there just needs to be a determination that these are the events that we're going to sponsor, and anyone else that comes in, knows that they just have to foot the bill. As far as the funding mechanism, where it goes, I think Kevin just said the board as a placeholder for the money. It's still coming from the general fund, like Director Christina Casavets said. But I'm in agreement. We just need to make a determination on which ones we're going to sponsor, not fund. And the other thing, talking about sponsorship, it's more than security. There's also insurance that needs to be paid. There's also solid waste issues. We have roll-off dumpsters that need to be picked up. So those are other things that need to be considered when we're talking about city sponsor, and how much of our in-kind works are we going to provide.
Director George Casavets was next in the queue, and then we'll go to Director Christina.
For off-duty works, how much an hour?
I'm sorry?
For off-duty work, how much is that an hour?
$50 an hour, minimum 3 hours.
Okay, thanks.
Director Christina Casavets.
So I will say, just for reference, on the AMP Commission, we get 3% of the hotel tax back.
Yeah, I just followed wrong.
3% of the hotel tax back for advertising and promotion within the city, which we then turn around and administer to events for advertising. And one of the things that we have done that I think has been pretty effective is we said, if we're turning these advertising dollars back over to you, you have to grow your event every year. So that's like with Still Horse Rally, they added, I think it was an antique car show. So that was something, to where these events are adding a benefit to the community. They're continuing to grow, bring more people in, bring,
Right.
different interests in, and so that I think has been pretty effective for us in keeping some of these events, mindful of, growing and being a benefit to the community.
Could you repeat the percentage? You said a number?
Yeah, so 3% of when anyone stays in a hotel, they get charged a 3% hotel tax. That goes into the AMP fund, which is a state commission, and then that money is used for advertising and promotion within the city. And so what we've done is we've created a system where I think it's up to $5,000 per event. They have to apply for it. They can apply. There's new events. I think maybe they get, is it 3 years? And then they have to start growing. But like for Steel Horse, it's a big event. It's an established event, but we've said we'll provide you, I think it's $5,000 for your advertising budget, but you've got to grow your event. So I know one of the things they added last year was the antique car portion. I think they did that at the Marshall's Museum, and then they will continue to grow if they want, that money from us. But the goal was to make sure these events continued to be a benefit to the community as a whole.
I like that approach.
And I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about if you decide to say that there's X number of events or X dollars of events, and what those events are that the city is going to bear the costs on, that the city has an agreement with them and they articulate, this is what we expect to bring to the community. We expect to bring X number of dollars in economic impact. We expect to bring, this number of tourists or visitors to Fort Smith, but lay that out and then hold them to that and see, year over year, are you improving? Are you bringing more? And if not, then maybe we need to consider, putting these dollars somewhere else. And that also protects the city. I wish the legal folks were here, but I think that would protect the city from accusations of improperly funding nonprofit and private ventures. And if you limit the number, then you've only got so many agreements that you've got to come up with.
Mayor.
Director Rigo was next in the queue, and then Director Neil Martin.
Chief, just I wanted to request that as we're discussing and considering this issue, could you just send round to us sort of the overtime policies, if you will? You know, I know you quoted the rate a little while ago, but just how it works and things like that. That would be appreciated. Yeah. Thank you.
I would direct staff to help come up with that criteria. What I've heard is certain criteria around what the city's willing to sponsor or not. So I direct staff to kind of start putting that together, obviously with our input, but start putting that together and come up with something that would allow us to be able to have more insight and visibility into some of these things.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to take a minute to thank our fine police department for the work they do in all of these activities, concerts, parades, and during the major demonstrations that we've had in this city. They have handled those, and I think a lot of that goes to the philosophy of community-based policing. People respect our police department, and they follow the instructions. So as a consequence, I can't recall of any major incidents we've ever had at a demonstration. So again, thank you, Chief, for your leadership there.
It's our pleasure.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to item number 3.
I'll try this one again. Okay, for the past several years, the city has waived parking meter fees downtown during the holiday season. In 2023, the board waived parking meter fees from November 24th, 2023 through March 31st of 2024. After discussion in an April 2024 study session, the board extended that waiver of parking meter fees through January 3rd of 2025, and then in January extended that waiver through August 1st of 2025. So, over the past 20 months of free parking downtown, there have been no discernible or dramatic or changes in parking patterns that we can determine. The police department, through its ambassadors, its bicycle patrol unit, the community relations unit, regular patrol officers, and most recently the downtown liaison officer, have continued to monitor parking along Garrison Avenue and the side streets and solicit input from downtown property and business owners about metered parking. There is some recognition that the parking meters encourage parking turnover, but the overwhelming response is that there is typically parking available to customers to use during the business day, such that the parking patterns from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday do not seem to change whether there are fees for parking or not. At the January 2025 meeting, the CBID, Central Business Improvement District, unanimously supported the idea of removing the parking meters from downtown. Downtown businesses and property owners support removal of the parking meters, verified again this past week by the downtown officer, FTO Solis, who's sitting over there. I shared with the board this afternoon a letter from County Judge Steve Holtz regarding concerns of removing parking meters around the old county courthouse building, an item we can work through. But as reflected in the packet, Andy pointed out that any revenues generated by parking meters are more than offset by expenses of parking enforcement and maintenance. And with that introduction, I'll defer to the board's discussion.
Okay, thank you. Director Christina Kasavage.
Well, I would say, we have data on this. I felt like we had data on it the last time we discussed it. I understand the need for the parking meters to remain around the courthouse. I'd be in agreement with that. That is one place I noticed those spaces are always taken up. But through the rest of downtown, I don't see a need for them. I think we need to remove them. And I think eventually if we get to a point where, downtown's really busy and it needs some sort of metered parking, I think it probably would be done with a more updated system with an app or pay to park, something like that with numbered spaces.
Okay, thank you. Director Rico.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, from the get-go, I've agreed that, or believe that these should be removed. You know, as it was pointed out, and it's up there on the screen, the last 2 years that revenue was collected, I mean, it's tens of thousands of dollars underwater versus the actual cost to enforce the parking. You know, Officer Solis, thank you for the survey that you conducted that showed 76% of the surveyed downtown property and business owners do not support the parking meters, and 73% of those same folks said that their customers were daily users of parking. So certainly they have a vested interest and recognition of the topic. And so, you know, I think that the time is right to have a resolution for our consideration for, you know, permanently enabling free parking downtown, with the exception that Director Kitsavis pointed out about immediately around the courthouse, and, you know, would like administration to give us some cost options for removal of the meters as well. You know, what that looks like, particularly if there's even just some in-house time. I mean, I reckon that we have a piece of equipment on hand that could remove these meters, I would suspect. But
just to that point, I'll say that the meter heads themselves come out rather easily. And from 10th Street up towards the IC Church, those meters have already been removed, and I mean the meters themselves were removed and the posts were removed. And hardly anybody noticed that they were that happened. So,
Director Martin,
do we know what the reason would be for them to be filled up by the courthouse? I mean, is it because the bakery district's there? Is it people going to the courthouse? I
think it's all of those things. Okay. I think they have about 55 or so spaces that are on the courthouse property, right. But they do reserve some of those for handicapped, I think. But the ones that are around the perimeter have always been full, just because there's traffic in and out of the courthouse, and you know, some of that traffic doesn't last. I mean, some of that courthouse business doesn't last very long, but it could, you know, 10 to 30 minutes. But it all sort of, I mean, there's not really enough spaces to go around. Right. So, and aside from the meters themselves, I think there are potentially ways that we could partner with the county to help monitor that. I mean, because if we leave meters in place, there's going to be an enforcement requirement. Right. I mean, you don't run meters and then not have parking tickets associated with those. And so, that's something to work out. I think that with the county's interest in maintaining some metered space turnover around the immediate vicinity, there might be some willingness to work there. I think that's something we can talk about. But for all intents and purposes, I think that as has been said, the parking meters on the avenue and the side streets are a different animal than the courthouse, which we could treat differently.
Officer, you in agreement with that? I mean, it's just kind of the nature of the businesses and the nature of the come on up to the mic. Come on up to the mic. Kind of the nature of all the businesses that are around there, the nature of the business that goes on at the courthourse kind of tends to have those spots just continually stay there.
Before you start, I'd like you to introduce yourself, just in turn, and what your new role is recently.
Yes, sir. I'm Officer Julio Solis for the Fort Smith Police Department. I'm the newly assigned downtown liaison officer. So pretty much my job is to coordinate projects and have a community-based approach to the downtown area. Right. They bring up issues and things like that. And my apologies. Could you repeat your question one more time?
So I mean, I think Administrator Dingman talked about the nature of the businesses that are around like the bakery district, and also you have the courthouse there. That seems to be filled versus the parking spots on Garrison. I mean, do you kind of agree that it's that type of business, the things that are going on at the courthouse, that generally keep those spots filled, or are you seeing maybe something else, that people are just going down there and parking, and they work down there and they're just staying down there all day? I mean, just observational thoughts that you have.
So I've only been in this position for about a month and a half, so my observations for about a month and a half is yes. A lot of the businesses that I spoke to did mention that the parking it's a big problem because, especially in the downtown and in the main strip.
Right.
And the reason for that is because you have an overflow of parking coming into other people's fronts.
Right.
And so they're having issues with that. Now, I do believe that a lot of it is from the heavy congested business area there, from the Baker District and the courthouse.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Director Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor. Just three things. One, for city staff, do we have a way, do we have plenty of parking and behind the building for the city staff, especially since we've acquired the building? How does
Yes,
that
I believe
work?
so. We have 75 spaces behind the building, plus we're still using some spaces that are, I think we have a lease still with Walden, Williams, and Lick for some of their spots. But yeah, I think we have adequate parking for city staff.
And also, my conversations with Chief Baker earlier, as him and I talked about the parking garage, there were some concerns you had mentioned about the parking garage, and I just think as we talk about this in tandem, the law of unintended consequences is a real thing. Can you speak to that, and is there any proposals?
Well, there was an email from somebody at the State Department, I think, but I guess since the meters have been bagged on Garrison Avenue, there's been an influx of unauthorized parking at the parking garage. And so, I mean, that's still a city-owned piece of property. So we're going to have to decide what enforcement of that parking area looks like. I think it could be done automatically. I mean, there used to be working gates that could be, tickets that would allow, folks to pay for parking and that sort of thing. I'm not necessarily an advocate of the police department being charged with enforcing parking at the parking garage, but if we are, we'll certainly do that. I think there's going to be, if we go permanently removing the meters from downtown, I think there's going to be more need for enforcing some way the parking in that particular area.
So I just wanted to introduce that into this conversation for administration to know as well. And then the only other one was, if it's around the courthouse, could the sheriffs and could the county assist with the maintenance of those meters? Does the Fort Smith Police Department have to do that? That's a question I have as well. Could we involve them in helping with the meters around that? And then that still continues to free up the police department. Thank you.
And the answer is yes, we can enter into an MOU with the county to allow them to enforce our parking.
That would be my preference. Thank you.
We'll leave Fort Smith out of it and let them take care of the meters.
Yes.
Okay.
What if we just left the meters and I believe we've got good people here. I don't know that we necessarily need to enforce it. We're talking about, 10 meters over there? If we just left the meters, I think people probably put their money in.
I'd like to believe that.
Either way.
The county judge didn't think so.
It's cheaper to try it and see than to pay someone to
You mean just leave the meters and not do anything?
Just leave the meters and on the honor system around the courthouse. A lot of people probably, I think would put their money in and do the right thing.
They still have to be maintained, and that's the problem with these coin-based meters is they fill up because people do put, they put money in them. Even the ones we've bagged, the bags come off, people still put money in them. So, I'm for that. But somebody's still going to have to go around to check the meters and take the money out and do that sort of thing.
How much money have we made?
Losing money.
No, he's saying even when they're bagged, the bags come off and people put money in, even though they're not being monitored.
No.
Well, there's likely not been any of them that have been emptied.
It's still less than what it's costing us to maintain them. It's a net loss.
Jeff, how hard would it be even for just those spaces to do like the you see in other cities with the number, like the Park Mobile or or things like that?
It would not be hard. I think and that's one of the things we've talked about in terms of if we do remove the meters from the avenue, what if we see a problem? What if we see things filling up to the point where parking on the avenue is a problem? Well, then we could potentially implement one of those systems where we have zoned parking, or we number the spaces and you can pay by an app for the space or in the zone that you're in, where like the type of system you're talking about. Those don't require a physical meter there at each space. And so we wouldn't have to go through necessarily the capital project of replacing the meter heads themselves or updating that equipment. We could just use it through the app. I mean, those are things that we've looked at. There are products like that can manage a parking garage much the same way. And so we've looked at those types of things. But then again, our parking, the demand for our parking, even at its highest, is during that business day, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And those are the only times that we did enforcement anyway. So in the evenings and the weekends, we didn't do any enforcement. And so all, the parking garage, all the parking spaces, the surface lots on public property, all of those were free parking for most of the sort of those entertainment type of hours. And really, it's the business day that we're concerned about with metered parking.
I mean, I don't know how many more times we can have this discussion. We've got the data. We've had it for close to 2 years now. Let's put it on an agenda, take a vote, and move on. We've got bigger fish to fry.
I second that.
Amen.
It's a motion and a second.
Director Settle.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I would suggest is if the county would like to have the meters around the courthouse, which I'm in favor of, let them monitor meters, let them collect the dollars, let them take the money, just get the city out of it. But I'm okay with the county wanting to do that, and because there'll be no expense to us, because if they have a better idea, it's great. If not, they can use the meters and let them take the money, meter them, monitor it, and be done.
Thank you. I tend to agree with Director Settle. Again, that helps us have a good relationship with the county on an idea that they have. And I'm at City Hall almost every day, and I've noticed no issues with parking being available to people going into City Hall. There's parking on the east side of the building, and there's usually some spaces up front throughout the day. So I haven't seen any issues with parking, free parking. Director Settle.
Mayor, the only thing I'd have to add is kind of interesting that we're talking about getting rid of downtown parking metering, where other cities are talking about increasing the cost to park downtown.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you. At this time, we will, item 4 is simply asking if everyone has reviewed the preliminary agenda for July 22nd of 2025. If there are no comments, at this time we will go to the Citizens Forum. Madam Clerk.
We have Crystal Cadelli.
Good evening. Thank you. Hope you're all doing well, and thank you for letting me speak tonight. I just I took a little break from the meetings and had some time to reflect and just to watch from afar. And, consistently attending these meetings for nearly a year, along with a dedicated group of people, I've learned a lot about our city, some good, some bad. But, I attend because I'm passionate about the city and I want it to flourish. But each week, I notice that, several of our leaders, our department heads, they show up unprepared. They lack crucial information for this board, and a lot of times just outright withhold information. We elected you as citizens to represent us, and you set the tone for city administration. And I know that Ms. Katsavas tried to pass that you guys be responsible for the hiring and firing of department leads, which I was absolutely not opposed to. But in reality, in a way, you are still in charge of hiring and firing department leads by your city administrator. The expectation that you hold with your city administration also sets the tone for his employees. And so I would just ask that this board live with transparency and honesty and have the expectations out of their administrator and make him have the same expectations out of his departments. You know, I feel like it's somewhat increasingly become clear that some members of this board are not here for the citizens, but here for their own self-interest, which is a very sad state and is very shameful. The residents deserve more. We have faced rising sewer and water costs. We're paying for a consent decree that has gone on for apparently almost since I was born. But again, it's been ignored for the whole time that it's been under a consent decree. I feel that we're probably going to face street and drainage crisis in the future. But the ink wasn't even dry, and Talk Business was already putting out an article with the Acme Brick Park and $43 million in water meter technology that is absolutely not necessary. The water meter replacement, necessary. The technology, unnecessary. It just seems like we have a spending problem, and, you know, it's causing burden to the citizens of Fort Smith. And reporting is showing month over month that our revenue collection is down. Our home sales are down. People are moving from the city. And what do we have to attract the citizens? Parks? It's not enough. People come to shop. People come for nightlife. People come to amusement parks. People don't come for parks. You know, Oklahoma has put in a no tax on food. They're grocery shopping in Oklahoma, not Fort Smith, Arkansas anymore. You know, we need to collectively work together. The mayor, you know, you do a lot for the city, you say. We need to be bringing in businesses. Private businesses is what grows a city, that brings in visitors. And that's what we need. The city cannot do it alone. They cannot build and build and build. We don't have the revenue for it. And private businesses come for low taxes. They come for workforce. And they also come for low cost of living. So that's what the board needs to focus on. Those three areas to bring our private businesses here to make the city as good as what it could be. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk? Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we're going to adjourn. And then we're going to take 5 minutes, and then we'll go into the special meeting. I will. We're going to take 5 minutes, if that's okay. Okay, thank you.
We are going to
Here.
Christina Katsavas.
Here.
Kevin Settle.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. This time I'll ask if there's any board member may have an item of business not already on the agenda for this meeting. Okay. Seeing none, the item of this business is a special meeting. So at this time, the board will convene into executive session. We'll go into the regular room over here as required by law. And we are having an executive session, and that is to interview 2 candidates for Director of Internal Audit. I think we have everyone back. And we're going to reconvene. The board of directors interviewed one candidate. One candidate did not appear this evening. Mr. James Carter, I think is his name. We interviewed Mr. James Carter for the position of internal auditor, but there was no action taken. Is there anything else for the good of the board?
Motion to adjourn.
Need a second, please. Thank you.
Second.
When should she be back?
He don't know. Hey, George, he don't know.